Good evening, friends. The operational situation at the front by the end of February 15th. Let's talk with you in more detail about the Bakhmut, Avdeevka, and South Donetsk sectors of the front. Let's start with the Bakhmut direction. Bakhmutsky and Chasiarsky directions Bogdanovka. Fighting continues, high intensity remains in this sector of the front, both in the Bogdanovka area and south of it. Further attempts are being made by Russian troops to advance along the railway. Active hostilities are underway in the area of the railway platform of the Valerianovka station, and attempts are also being made to advance both from the Popovsky forest in the direction of the city Hours of Yar, and south of the Popovsky forest to occupy one of the landings north of Ivanovo. The Russian troops are putting the greatest emphasis on it now, not only on the northern flank, but also on the Bakhmut direction as a whole. Let's be blunt, this is the area they are interested in order to try to attack Ivanovskaya from two directions, to carry out assault operations. What do we have on the eastern outskirts of Ivanovo? So as you remember, a few days ago we sorted out the moment with you, corrected the gray zone, added somewhere, painted somewhere, about the fact that Russian troops attacked Ivanovskoye, and they managed to catch on, gain a foothold in about this area. So there was one of the positions. As a result, they managed to knock them out. This is the latest information today. They are definitely not present at this point where they were earlier, but at the same time, they naturally make further attempts to improve the tactical situation and attack on this sector of the front. But we do not record any changes. At the same time, it should be noted a very important point, that against the background of an increase in the number of air strikes by bombs on Avdeevka direction, neighboring directions, so it cannot be said that significantly, but still the number of air bomb attacks has decreased. Well, naturally, tactical aviation is now more involved in Avdeevka. This is logical. Therefore, there is some positionality as we see, for the most part of the front, that is, we record some decline, not only in air strikes, rocket and aerial bombs, but also in assault actions by Russian troops. We proceed further, the Avdeevka direction. It's very difficult for us on it. Today, we will start from the northern flank. So, the enemy managed to advance to the intersection of Industrial Avenue, with a section of the road about 0542, the entrance to the city, in the area of that very stel, and take one of the fortified support areas. In this area, active military operations are currently underway in the direction of Avdeevka as a schema, assault actions, so the enemy is attacking in the north direction. In this sector of the front, the enemy advanced in a section up to 520 meters wide, to a depth of 430 meters. At the same time, attacks continue west of Avdeevka. Yesterday, as you remember, the Russian troops managed to take part of the forest belt, attacking from the area of two gas stations in the western direction. Well, we said then, that not only his attacks would be in the north direction, in the direction of the intersection, but they would definitely try to go south. But at the same time, today, the enemy has advanced further in the western direction, that is, in the area of intersections, not only to the south and to the west. In this area, we have the enemy's advance marked on a section up to 830 meters wide, to a depth of 580 meters. Well, to the south of the street of agricultural machinery, which we talked about just the same on the daytime broadcast, that the enemy is betting, and we said on yesterday evening, that there is a very big bet on moving to the station lane and going out over the bridge. What I focused your attention on in the previous broadcast. Unfortunately, the enemy managed to advance in a section up to 730 meters wide, to a depth of 240 meters. Assault actions are continuing now from the enemy, both in the south direction, that is, along the same industrial avenue, and attempts to improve the tactical situation along Chistyakov and Jaroev streets, as we also talked about, that they had attempts to attack in the south direction, but they were more interested in the bridge. The bridge was leveled relative to the front line. The situation is very difficult, and the progress, if we are talking west of Avdeevka, is in the direction of the village of Lastikino. So, we will look at the situation, what the enemy is trying to implement, because now it is a little difficult to say his main plans. Whether along with the storming of Avdeevka, to carry out an assault on Lastokin, the village of Lastokin, I do not know. In any case, the main task was to cut off the supply as much as possible, and the assault actions in the southern direction are also continuing in the direction of the Derna beam. So, here it goes by itself. And here, it is clear that the enemy is interested in another intersection, in the direction of the Chemist district, aka the 9th quarter. As for the Donetsk beach, then, the situation is being clarified. There is no information at all on this area, for the last, well, roughly speaking, let's say, 24 hours, that's for sure. And that is fighting, but whether Russian troops have advanced or not, is unknown. We move to the south of Avdeevka. We also have a very difficult situation. The enemy also published footage from this area. Fortified Zenith. According to reports, it was abandoned by the APU fighters, because the enemy, as you remember, its main task was to surround the Russian troops, fortifying both Zenit and Cheburashka, and accordingly, it was reported that the APU retreated from this area, so the enemy published pictures of the flag setting in this area. Well, and promotion on a site up to 2 kilometers wide, to a depth of 580 meters. The Cheburashka fortified area is questionable, the situation here is unknown. There are a number of messages, so I will say it now, we will already look there. In any case, you will see it on tomorrow's broadcast. So, there is a message that there was an attack not only on the fortified area, in the direction of the Zenit fortified area, but also Russian troops tried to further advance to Cheburashka along the road, and part of the road, this is conditional for tonight. The information is also under their control. Well, the south of Cheburashka, I will speak bluntly, remains in question. Well, they also advanced northeast of the experienced, what we talked about. There will be attacks in the direction of the Garden Association, they will try to create an environment, break through, advance to this part, and align the front line along it, of course. There is a small advance of the enemy at the stick, in a section up to 500 meters wide, to a depth of 180 meters. But we are with you on the previous broadcast, just the same, I said not only in the east direction, but also in the west. I am attacking in order to level the front line, and there is also an enemy advance in the west. Well, actually, he will align the front line conditionally, along the neighboring beam that passes here. That is, but let's leave my forecast, what I see from the vector of their attacks, from what we said on the previous one, that there is activity between Opitny and Vodiane, well, conditionally in the direction of the Chemist district, the 9th quarter, but it has a positional character. But in any case, they are transferring their additional forces to this section of the front, and will definitely try to carry out assault operations to the northeast on this section as well. As for the other official messages from the fighters from the field, there was information about what it means, that the Russian troops have superiority, according to reports from the field, 1-7. Therefore, the situation is as it is. And the opponents will naturally use tactical aviation as much as possible now. Between the north and the south, of course, the question becomes, what about the situation in the east? If the APU left one of the positions in order not to get surrounded, as reported from the field, yes, naturally there is a question with the east. The situation in the east, east of Avdeevka, is a little bit different. So, naturally, the most dangerous situation will develop if the enemy manages to advance between Vodiane and Opite, in the north direction, to the northeast, and then it will be possible to say that it is necessary to leave the eastern positions as well. But today, it means that with regard to the position north of the Tsarskaya Okhota complex, we do not record any changes. But with regard to the Donetsk filtration station and garden associations east of the sand pit, we have absolutely no information on this area at all, so I can't comment on it yet. But we have, as we see, a very dangerous situation is already developing to the west, and even I said in the southwest direction from Avdeevka that they are trying to break through. Taking into account the superiority, taking into account the tactical aviation involved on the part of the Russian troops, naturally they will continue to press, and are not going to stop in the near future, so the situation is as it is. Moving on. Pervomaiskaya, the assault operations continue. It means that with regard to tactical aviation, it has decreased its number of strikes in this sector of the front, but nevertheless the assault operations continue. This is exactly the same, I think, together with the message from the fighters from the field, about the superiority of the Russian army, about their reserves, about the fact that, in general, the number of Russian troops concentrated on the Avdeevka direction that can be involved is being announced. Naturally, what I have been preparing you for the last 2 months is that the enemy has no problems with reserves, and how he can afford assault actions in neighboring areas. Naturally, the defense has become more effective at the expense of drones, but there is such a moment as we manage corrected aerial bombs, if only. So, with the control module, they create the greatest, I would say, complexity now, when these are not isolated cases of strikes but such massive ones. And here, like it or not, but the situation is what it is. On May Day, everything happens the same way along Pershatravneva Street. We do not record any new changes. At the same time, there are attacks not only in Pervomaisky itself, but also to the north, between Vodian and Pervomaisky. Along the beam itself, Russian troops are trying to advance. According to Georgievka, it means that those attempts to advance along the Garden Partnership that were managed to repel most of the attacks. So we do not record any changes on the southeastern outskirts of the Georgievsky rate, but at the same time, the pressure in the eastern part, everything north of the Georgievsky rate in the gray zone on the contrary, increases from the enemy. And moreover, we have already said on the previous broadcast that it is south. Everything that we have, well, conditionally between the Garden Association and Victory, even south of Victory, there is quite high activity of small infantry groups. And today, by the end of the day, we observe such a picture that there is also some enemy activity to the north, which means that the Georgievsky Stavka, northwest of Marenka, but it is naturally aimed at dispersing the APU as much as possible by force along this section of the front, during the fact that the enemy is now storming the eastern part, trying to break through as much as possible to the intersection. One of his tasks is just to get out, with a subsequent exit to a part of the forest belt. Well, in general, the difficult situation remains, the fighting continues. There are no changes after the victory, the fighting continues of a positional nature. Well, Novomikhailivka. We have said that the situation remains quite dynamic in the locality itself. Somewhere it is possible to counterattack the enemy, to discard, but he makes new attempts to attack, and accordingly, in the south, somewhere he had partial success in the gray zone. So now I would say, the big bet is not so much to advance through the settlement itself, as to approach the industrial zone south of Novomikhailivka, because there are attacks. The enemy's attack vector is now aimed at the industrial zone. To all this, add the fact that from the eastern part, the main attacks of the Russian troops are carried out along the south of the settlement, that is, along Timoryazov Street, Academician Timoryazov in the western direction. Well, I repeat, the vector to the northwest from the south is present, so most likely, it is trying to advance to the industrial zone, in order to pull up armored vehicles into the settlement itself, and already carry out assault operations, with the support of armored vehicles. Therefore, the situation is difficult, it remains dynamic, but, as it is, there is a lot from the enemy. At the same time, with regard to air bomb attacks, their number has decreased, not only in Novomikhailivka itself, on its outskirts, but in general, I must say, for the South Donetsk sector of the front, slightly, but decreased. That is, Avdeevka is pulling them out now, unfortunately, it is pulling them over. In the Velikonovo-Selkovsky direction without any changes. Along the Orekhovsky section of the front. Here, I will comment on both the moment from the front and one very important news. It means that with regard to the front, fresh footage has been published, the enemy is showing here, why I said on previous broadcasts that I can't say that the initiative is behind one of the parties, but recently we have seen an improvement in tactical positions on the part of the armed forces, but at the same time it does not decrease activity on the part of the Russian troops, so they are trying to attack. They are trying to improve tactical positions. The positions in the direction of the button, so they are mainly attacking from the area, well, let's say conditionally, from the area of the beam, because it is exactly in the western direction, and the southwestern direction from the work. That is approximately this area. We do not fix any changes, we manage to repel most of the attacks, but nevertheless the enemy does not give up trying. At the same time, the second thing I wanted to comment on is this news. Today, there are reports again that the enemy, Russian troops are preparing to carry out offensive actions in the Zaporozhye direction. Well, most likely, I repeat, this is the Orkhov and Gulyopoli direction, perhaps also Stepnogorsk. Well, let's leave this moment now. That is, they have the strength, but so far there is Avdeevka. Seeing that the decrease in the number of air bomb strikes, it does not allow them to then advance. The same Novomikhailivka, they have a number of difficulties. The same Georgievka, the neighboring Mariinsky direction. The Kurakhovsky direction, also the Mayday, which they are storming, they understand perfectly well that only after Avdeevka can they really seriously consider assault offensive actions on a larger scale than there is one settlement. 1, 2, 3 forest belts, only after Avdeevka. Therefore, I will say this, it all depends on Avdeevka. There will be, or there will not be. Now I cannot say that they will not carry out offensive actions, because they had a clear plan to go, as I have said repeatedly, to the Uspenskovskaya beam, from two directions, that is, to bypass the work from the north, and accordingly northwest of Verbovo. Therefore, there are such plans. I have voiced them repeatedly. Over the past 4 or 5 months, we have been commenting on all the moments that have been here. We have seen the vector with you as well. In other words, the enemy tried to implement it all, but failed. But of course, if he tries on a larger scale, and he will have the same superiority in assault, I mean attack aircraft 1 to 7. There we will conditionally even take 1 to 5, yes, naturally. This will be a slightly different alignment of forces, and despite the fact that he will drag tactical aviation to this section of the front, although just because of Zaporozhye, I emphasize, with tactical aviation, I do not know if he will risk involving the Russian command such a number, taking into account their experience in the markets, when it was hit 3 times by the air defense system. Therefore, this is such a moment, we will look at the situation. And then, there is a lot of news, a lot of what I have commented on to you. Well, as for the markets, they asked to comment in more detail on whether there are any changes or not, because again there are a lot of reports about attacks, that the APU is trying to expand the bridgehead, and so on, and so on. Look, now again, if we talk about Russian troops, without air bombs, they understand that it will be extremely difficult for them here. That is, classic positional combat operations. I think that by the market we will continue to skip there, every 3, 4 or 5 days. Well, if there is any news, of course I will comment. But there is a similar situation on our side. So far, we can say that we can increase the bridgehead, carry out assault operations. We have a slightly different kind of tasks, because we need to restrain the enemy, so that he does not advance further than Avdeevka, and in no case enters the operational expanse, because he also plans it. Therefore, the APU is taking all necessary measures to prevent this from happening. Therefore, I don't think it's worth considering seriously from our side, even an increase in the expansion foothold somewhere new. But this is my opinion. This is the situation we have at the front by the end of February 15th. It is very difficult in Avdeevka, and I will make a remark here. So look, we have noted all the changes from drone footage, and you probably noticed that in the north of Avdeevka, in the south, it was the first half of the day, that is, it was light both at the intersection and at the zenith fortified area. Therefore, the information is plus or minus with a delay, so everything can change very quickly. As far as it was relevant, I presented it to you, but the situation here, as you can see, is changing very, very quickly. Very complicated. Until tomorrow's broadcast, be healthy. Glory to the chosen son of Ukraine.